right, so I thought I'd sit down because I think it looks cool. I look like a jazz singer. The look of love. Okay, my name is Tendayi, and I just want to hang out with you today and have a conversation about. So I'm mostly interested in the authenticity of innovators. That's the fight that I've been having with innovators for the last couple of years. You walk into an organization and people walk you to their lab and they show you everything that they're working on and all this stuff. And then you can ask them a couple of questions like, how long have you been open? And they go, well, we've been around for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Ah, great. How many net new business models have you created for your company? And you'll get two types of answers that are kind of strange. One answer will be, we're not really into creating new businesses, we're here to change the culture. That's the other one. And then the one that people also say all the time is, it doesn't matter whether we create new businesses or not, we've learned a lot. Right? And so it's sort of starting to observe the maturity of all the conversations we're having. Even when I was going into the breakout rooms, you can see people are starting to really think about what the role of innovation is. And the role of innovation really is to help your company last for a long time or last longer and longer and avoid disruption by helping it create net new business models. It's not about creating new technologies. Sometimes I work with organizations, and I'm sure you've been in these companies where they've won an innovation award for creating an app. And so I think yesterday I was talking about this, like you go into an airline company and they've won an innovation award for creating an app that goes into their in-flight system, like on the screen. They're like, yeah, now the passengers can choose movies without making it hard for them to scroll. And then like, hey, we won an innovation award for this thing. It's like, okay, so you won an innovation award for the thing that went on the airline in-flight system, but you've done nothing to change the airline business model. So it doesn't really matter that there's a good app on the plane. It's the same thing as like the musicians that were playing on the Titanic. Like, it doesn't matter if the business model is failing that you've launched an app, right? And so we really need to start thinking about these things. And then the other thing that we really need to start thinking about, and thank you, I was watching your talk, it was wonderful, Frank, right, is this whole notion that it doesn't matter if you create really great things if your company won't take it to scale. It doesn't matter. Like, it's the same thing as doing nothing. Like, if you work for 3 years on a really great idea, and then your company does not take it to scale, it's like that puzzle that people ask you, like, if a tree falls in a forest and there's nobody there to hear it, does it make a sound? Right? That's the same question. It's like, if you're an innovator and everything that you've worked on doesn't ever go to market, are you really an innovator? Right? And those are the questions that we have to always constantly ask ourselves. So what that actually means is, beyond working on ideas, we have to really think about how we impact the organizations we work for to create the right processes that allow us to then be able to take our ideas to scale. And that's the orientation of what I want to talk about today. Now, when innovators refer to themselves as pirates, which is the title of my next book, they're often talking about how they're different. Their behavior is different from the behavior of the MBAs inside their organization. Now, I can always tell which innovator is going to flame out quickly inside a large company by how they talk and how they conduct themselves. And I'll give you a few examples as we're going through the conversation. But the most important thing that we can do as innovators is to influence our leadership. To actually start build. We want to make innovation a legitimate part of how our company does business. I'm going to say that again. As innovators, what we're trying to do is make innovation a legitimate part of how our company does business. You know how, like, the guy in finance, the CFO, he doesn't have to justify his job, but as innovators, we always have to justify ours. And the reason is because our roles are not yet a legitimate part of how the company views itself as doing business. All right? And so we really need to sort of start engaging with our leaders and really having empathy for the fact that they're walking a tightrope, and at the same time we're asking them to run the core business and do innovation. So what does that mean for them, and how are they able to do that, right? And so that's really, really important for us to go in there with the empathy of having really meaningful conversations with them. So the innovators that I meet that are going to flame out are the innovators that are angry. Like, yeah, I'm working in this large company, all these leaders don't get it, they're gonna get disrupted by startups. It's like, okay, that's one way to view it, but another way to view it is that actually there's a meaningful challenge that they're facing that they have to deal with, and the more empathy you have for that, the better it is that you're able to actually have an influence. And so what I often say is that forget about the leaders, you first need to be the change that you're trying to bring into your organization, which means that you yourself have to have an authentic interest in creating new business models for your company. Now, believe it or not, over 50%, over 60% of innovators I meet are not interested in this. They want to have idea competitions and hackathons, right? Let's have an idea competition, let's have a hackathon. Let's have a design sprint, because in 5 days, you'll be able to create something that will create value in 5 days. That's so inauthentic. It's totally inauthentic, right? What happens beyond the 5 days matters actually much more than what happens during the 5 days. They go, don't worry about that. We're just trying to change mindsets. It's a culture thing, right? And the more and more we say that, I'm like, okay, that person is going to be fired in 2 years. The more if I hear people say that to me, I'm like, that person's going to be fired in 2 years. So we have to be the change that we want to see inside our organizations, which means stay away from innovation theater. Right? That's really what it means. Like, innovation is not a form of performance. Like, you're not supposed to be getting cool with it. I always get in fights with innovators because I'm like, you're not really like entrepreneurs, right? Because you get a salary every month and your mortgage gets paid. And so you don't have that fear of failure that like entrepreneurs have, because the fear of failure for an entrepreneur is existential, like they will lose their house. You have nothing on the line. Some people, they get like this secondment. Your job is guaranteed. Go spend 6 months in the lab, and if nothing happens there, you can come back to your job. There's nobody else in the entrepreneurship ecosystem that has this guarantee. So it's easy for us to get away with innovation theater because we don't have it in our guts. So what we really need is the change of our own mindsets. We need to really be thinking about what we're doing and whether what we're doing actually matters. Which means also that lean startup training is not enough. It's just not enough, right? So there's a lot of like workshops that we do. I've been part of those workshops. I go to a company, we do business model design, we do sticky notes, we go, woo, and everyone's jazzed up and like, yay! And then you go back to your company and you're back in your cubicle, right? So lean startup training is not enough. You do need to give people skills, but you do need to embed those skills in something that's much more transformational around your company, right? Another thing that I find that innovators don't have clarity on is the choices they have to make, right? Like, innovators are scrambling, and they're scrambling with the problem of imitation. If they see something happening somewhere in another company, they want to do it in their company, but they don't really understand how it helps. So I was upstairs, really great presentation, like the best instantiation of the kickbox that I've seen was the Swisscom presentation. It was like a really great instantiation. You could see that there was thoughtfulness that went into this. In other organizations, you don't see that same level of thoughtfulness. In fact, what you see is a mishmash of stuff. There's somebody with a box, and somebody with a hackathon, and somebody with an event, somebody with a beer and pizza night, somebody with something else, then somebody else is talking to the management about doing something. It's just chaos, right? Because we're not really clear about the choices that we have to make as innovators. And this clarity is really, really helpful. There's only 2 jobs for an innovator. 2 jobs. The first job is to create new growth. That's the main job. What we're trying to do is to create net new business models and new revenue for our organization. That's the main job. That's the real job. Now, the problem is you can't really do that job well unless you transform your organization in some sense to be allowed to do that. So those are the 2 jobs. We have programs that are aimed at changing how our company works, and we have programs that are aimed at driving new growth. Which one of these things are you doing right now? There's people that will hire products designed for new growth and use them for learning and culture change, and then it just doesn't really work. And then there's people that are working purely on transformation, but they're promising their organization new growth because they don't understand the distinction. Right? And this distinction is really important. I'll come back to it later, but it's something that we really have to think about. You have to actually make your choice. Now, once you've made your choice, and the choice that I often work with people to make is the transformation choice, which is, it's cool that you're working on ideas and everything, but you'll never be able to take these ideas to scale if you don't build a process where your leadership and your company can actually do it. So how do we actually do that? Well, the first thing you need to do is to have a little humility, okay? You're not Elon Musk. You're just not. Like, if you were Elon Musk, you wouldn't be here. Like, you wouldn't have the time. Right? I'm not Elon Musk. Father, I wouldn't be here at all. I'd be like somewhere like in a private jet having interesting conversations with much more interesting people. So we're not that. And I just say this to be dramatic, right? I say this to make the point that I literally walk inside companies and I see innovators with the biggest egos. Like, they're going around, like, throwing their weight around. Yeah, we're going to change this company. So what are you doing? Yeah, we're disrupting banking. You know, it's like, well, you're not really disrupting banking, because the first rule about disruption is you don't talk about disruption, right? Companies get disrupted because they don't see it coming. So if you're actually saying, I'm going to disrupt banking, you're not disrupting banking, right? And so this kind of crazy feeling that I'm Elon Musk and I work in a company full of idiots, like, that innovator will not last. They actually flame out. They flame out really, really quickly. Right? And this feeling that you're Elon Musk is also the reason why sometimes you have these challenges that happen inside large organizations. Inside most large organizations, everybody thinks the middle managers are all idiots. Like, everybody hates middle managers. So I once wrote an article for Forbes that said, in defense of middle managers who stifle innovation. And it's been on Forbes for a while. It's my lowest clicked on article. Like, all my other articles have like 13,000 clicks. This one is like 400 or something. Like, nobody wants to read an article defending middle managers that stifle innovation. And the reason is because middle managers are caught in this bind, right? And this bind goes like this. The CEO says, we need more innovation. We need to become disruptive, agile, unbossed, blah, blah, blah. The CEO is talking all this cool stuff. And then us as innovators in the organization go, cool, here's my idea. And then the middle manager goes, no, we're not doing that right now. Right? And because what we don't understand is that what's happening to the middle manager is this. The CEO is saying we need more innovation, and then when they're having private conversations with your manager, they're asking them about revenue in the next quarter. Right? And then you come up with your idea, and the middle manager's like, no, we're not doing that. Like, my bonus and my promotion is based on completely different things to what you think. Right? But when you walk inside large organizations, there are a lot of frustrated innovators that are complaining about how the CEO loves innovation, but the middle manager is an MBA idiot. And it's because we don't really understand. We haven't taken the time to absorb the situation we're in. So we think, right, I know the solution. I'm going to go do an innovation lab. So we go off and we build our silo. Far away from MBAs. No MBAs allowed here. Nobody's going to tell us to write business plans. We'll do whatever we want. We'll have sticky notes and pizza nights and all this stuff. And so everything is so cool. And then we generate all these ideas. The problem with most innovation labs is they don't have any funding to scale anything. That's the biggest problem. They have funding to hang out and do cool stuff. And the CEOs will even bring the media over. Do you know what an innovation lab is like? An innovation lab for CEOs is like a millionaire that owns a football team. So what they want to do is like bring the media over and like show everyone, like, hey, look, we got this thing, it's beautiful, and look at the guys in jeans and t-shirts. It's my football team. They're really good. But when it comes time to make decisions about scaling what's happening inside those large organizations, so you come out of your lab with your thing, there's nobody inside your organization that's wanting to take this to scale. And this is a big problem. I've worked with hundreds of innovation labs that really struggle with the scaling part. So really, you haven't really run away from the mothership. You're like a startup in chains. That's what Alexander Osterwalder likes to say, because you can't scale. Right? So we have to really think about these things as well. So how do you do this? I like to believe that before you do anything, if you launch any program, any innovation program inside a large company, you should start with discovery. Like a lot of innovators are really like excited when they get an opportunity to do something that they forget to take the time to understand the company within which they're going to be doing it. Right? And so we really need to begin with discovery. And one of the things that you need to really be thinking about is how innovation ready is the organization that I'm working in, right? How ready, do we have the right level of innovation readiness? And so innovation readiness is stuff like, do we have the right level of leadership support? Are leaders going to give us strategic guidance on what we need to work on? Do we have clear and protected resources? Do we have the right portfolio management tools that allow us to actually develop and design and scale business models? If none of these things are inside your organization, it's a problem, right, later on. Do we have the right organizational design, right? Does innovation matter? Does it have legitimacy and power? Or is it the first thing to be cut when the budgets are getting cut? Do we have a bridge to the core business? Like if I'm building an innovation lab, at the beginning, not at the end when you've now got everything all done, you're like, all right, now we need to think about whether we need to talk to leaders about scaling this stuff. You need to be thinking about the bridge to the core right from the beginning. Do we have the right rewards and incentives in terms of our organizational design? And can you see that none of this stuff says lean startup and tools and canvas? Right? But as innovators, that's where we want to start. Like, let's do a workshop. Bring Alex Osterwalder over, or bring Tendayi Viki over. Let's bring Eric Ries over here to talk and do training for our teams. But we haven't really tackled the top things that actually really matter. And then, of course, you do still need those things. You need a great innovation practice. You need the right tools. You need the right process. And, of course, you need to do skills and training. So to what extent, and I want people to be honest, like, to what extent does anybody in this room fully understand the level of innovation readiness inside the company they're working right now? The level of readiness of 1, 2, maybe 3, 4, right? But all of you are like innovation guys. And so that's the reason why we get surprised at the things that trip us up, because we haven't really looked around first, right? So that's really important. Another thing that's also important is this one. Innovators are so keen to get their own thing successful, they don't care about what else is happening inside their company. So when you go inside companies, there'll be like somebody else doing a growth thing, and another person doing a growth thing in a different division, and somebody else doing another thing on agile transformation, but it's kind of similar to the one doing the digital transformation. And there's so much stuff going on, and innovators are uninterested in mapping themselves with what's going on around them because they want to win. They want to be the ones that are famous for innovation inside their companies. So they don't care about whether or not they're really creating value by opening another lab or starting another innovation project or doing another hackathon, right? So you really need to have conversations with and look around. What else is happening in this company? What other programs are there? Believe it or not, like CEOs, they're actually distracted. Like they will approve 3 things that are exactly alike if they're presented in different names. It really does happen, right? And so you really need to map what's going on inside your organization. And so this tool here is really good for mapping, right? What programs do we have that are focused on creating new growth? What programs do we have that are focused on transforming the organization? And what programs are running right now that are kind of doing both? And then, believe it or not, there are actually programs inside companies that do neither. And you can see there's more stickies there than the other. That's actually really true, right? There's more programs inside large companies that do neither of those things. So this map then allows you to see the lay of the land. Another thing that you also need to be thinking about is like people that have done work inside your company that have failed. So that's also interesting about companies. Like people launch innovation labs and they fail, but they don't get fired. They get moved to something else. So they're still around the organization, and they can tell you where all the landmines are. You're not Elon Musk. Like the thing that tripped up the guy before you would trip you up. So it's better that you know up front. Right? Why am I saying these things? You say, well, like, why is he talking about this? I'm saying these things because I care that you care authentically about becoming successful at your work, rather than just being known for completing a program. Right? I care that you care about the success of the stuff that you're working on. Now, the ultimate goal of doing discovery is this. You want to find early adopters. That's what you want to find. You want to find early adopters inside your organization. A lot of teams that I work with, they want to go big on day one. They want to touch the whole company on the first day. Like, yeah, then we'll have this event, and then we'll talk to this leader, and then we'll bring this person, and we'll invite everyone, and then we'll we'll launch everything everywhere, all at once, at the same time. Okay? This is a really difficult thing to accomplish inside large organizations. And do you know why it's difficult to accomplish inside large organizations? Because we don't have any legitimacy. As innovators, we don't have any legitimacy. And here's just to show you how you can really tell that you don't have any legitimacy. Me and Michael, my friend over there, we were in a session inside a large organization that will remain unnamed. And one of the leaders was asking difficult questions. Where have you seen this work? And then, of course, we always say the same stuff, right? At Facebook, at Amazon, at LinkedIn. And then they go, oh, okay, that's really great. Where have you seen this work in our industry? Okay, so maybe you come up with examples. And then they go, oh, okay, have you ever done it? Right? And then you say, okay, yeah, no, I did it. Maybe sometimes you did a startup, right? Maybe you're like, yeah, I did a startup. And then they go, okay, cool, so you did a startup. Have you ever done it in this company? And so then that's it. Like, you have no legitimacy. One of the talks that I was watching upstairs was about creating momentum. Like, we have no momentum, right? And one way to create momentum is to start small. And we know this. We teach our startup teams this, right? Like, start small. Start with early adopters. Start with those leaders that will never ask you those questions. They don't care. They're really hankering to start working with you, right? So we really want to identify the early adopters. We don't want to do like have you worked with those teams that right at the beginning of their program, they have like a launch roadmap? Like, year one, we're going to do this, and then year two, we're going to do that, and year three. Like, I got into a fight with one team. I was like, you're never going to do any of that. The first half of your program is going to fail because you're going to send an email to a leader, and the leader is going to say, I have stuff to do. I'll get back to you in 3 months. Right? So that's why you really want to start small and really identify early adopters. Really, really work with early adopters first. And we know the definition of an early adopter, right? Has a problem, is aware of having a problem, has been actively looking for a solution, has tried to put a solution together themselves, and has and can acquire a budget, right? So you can actually translate this to your organization. Most of the leaders that I work with that bring me in are people who understand that the world is changing. They really are aware of the innovation deficit inside their company, right? The hardest conversation you have is with leaders who don't think that they need to innovate, right? It's better to actually start with leaders that think that you need to. And they're there in every company. There's one or two early adopters that get it, right? They're actively looking for solutions. They've sponsored some innovation activities inside the organization before. And of course, they have the resources and time to invest in what you're working on. So I have a question for you. Of all the programs you're running right now, how many of you are doing this with leaders that have these characteristics? All right. Okay, so let me ask the question differently, actually. Let me set a trap for you. Did you deliberately look for leaders to this, or did you just luck into them? Right, so that's also an interesting one, right? So again, we have to be deliberate about the choices that we're making. Now, the reason we work with early adopters is because we want to get momentum and legitimacy. And so what we want to do is get an early win. We want to work with early adopters to get an early win. So I was listening to Linda's presentation upstairs about the work she's doing at Rumble, and she said the thing that she's most proud of is the revenue they get by the end of their first year, rather than like the projected revenue 5 years later. The revenue at the end of the first year is the thing to be most proud of, because you can immediately start to show leaders that we're having an impact. And that's how you get legitimacy, right? Now the question is, have you done it in this company? And go, yeah, actually the 3 of us that worked on are right now in market, and they're making $2 million in revenue a year. I was like, okay, that's interesting. Now we're having a conversation. But a lot of us don't have that. We have PowerPoint slides that say, let me tell you what VUCA is. The world is VUCA. Right? That's what we're doing. Right? PowerPoint is not about VUCA and disruption and all this stuff. We're like a political campaign. We don't have anything tangible we've done. Rather, we're in a political campaign to convince our leaders to do stuff, right? And that's really, really difficult, and that's why sometimes we find the work frustrating. When you get your early win, celebrate like crazy. Like, write blog posts, take pictures, go on the intranet of your company and tell everyone your success story. Don't hide the early win. Roll out the leader that you worked with, make them famous. Right? Because when you make that leader famous, other leaders are like, I'm getting left behind. Can I also be part of your program? Right? So rather than go out in the world and go on a political campaign to try and recruit everyone, create like a magnetic field towards you, draw people towards you by the quality of the work you do. That's really, really fundamental. Now, when you get your early win, don't get distracted. Because that's also what happens. You get an early win, you're now celebrated inside the organization, you're now a rock star in your company, so now you don't want to rock the boat. Because remember what we're trying to do. We're trying to make innovation a legitimate part of how our company views itself. So a lot of people, when they get an early win, they stop. Like you walk into companies, I kid you not, you walk into companies, they're like, yeah, meet such and such. He's the guy that did that new thing, that app that went worldwide for us. You're like, okay, hey, nice to meet you. Pateri, is that how you say your name? Nice to meet you, Pateri. When did the app go out? When was this business model last launched? It's like, 5 years ago. It's like, okay. So you're still famous from something you did 5 years ago, and nothing else has happened since. Right? And you meet a lot of innovators like that inside large organizations. And then over time, it's like, I know, Tendayi did this thing 5 years ago, but he's still like trying to get famous. So people start making jokes about you, and then before you know it, you're out. Right? So really, what you want to do is leverage the early win and your newfound fame to creating a repeatable process. You want to create a repeatable process. Don't use your newfound fame to get an innovation space for yourself, a physical innovation. So like, we need to get a lab. Don't use it for just that. Try and use it to get other spaces. Remember we talked about innovation readiness earlier, right? Try and use your fame to create new spaces. Try and use your fame to create a space for innovation in strategy. Try and use your new fame to create a space for innovation in budgets. Try and use your newfound fame to create space in the portfolio of products and services that the company has, right? Use your newfound fame to create space on the organizational chart for innovation. Space to collaborate. Space on the incentive structure. That's what you should be leveraging your fame for. Space for new tools, right? Space to fail, and space to learn. Beyond just the physical spaces that we create with our innovation labs, we also need to create spaces inside the organization itself that allow us to do the work. And that's what we leverage this fame that we have for. So, for example, one of the things that you want to do is to create what Eric Ries calls metered funding, right? You want to create this process where ideas get initial investments, and then they get a next level of investment, and then they scale, right? So you want to create this. You couldn't possibly do this yourself. You can only do this in collaboration with other people. You need to get leadership approval. You need to get approval from finance. You couldn't do this yourself, right? So that's why it's important, as you start to sort of do your work, to start working with catalysts. Like gather around you some catalysts that will help you actually do the work, right? Because you really, really, really can't do this yourself, right? Another thing is that you're now moving beyond early adopters. You're crossing the chasm, as people say. The early adopters are happy to work with you when you don't have things that work. Broken tools, no support from everybody, no legitimacy. The early majority need you to to show them how it works. and to also show that you have legitimacy and support inside the organization. So you need to start creating this for yourself. So again, this is the time now to create your PowerPoint slide and get leadership support, like get actual endorsement from C-level, because you actually need that to scale. This is the time to start thinking about creating an innovation board, the one that's going to handle all these incremental investments, right? This is also the time to start working with the enablers. So, for example, one of the companies that I work with, we designed an innovation process, and then we thought, right, this innovation process will never work until we get legal and compliance in here. So we brought legal and compliance into the room, and we said to legal and compliance, what we want you to do is one thing per sticky note. Tell us all the things that need to be dealt with before a product is allowed to go out into the market. So they wrote all the things that need to be dealt with before a product is allowed from a legal and compliance perspective to go out into the market. So they write all these things down. Then we go, okay, let's put all these things at the end of our innovation process. Now, let's go back at the beginning. When a team is just testing whether customers have the need, which of these things do you need? They go, okay, well, we don't really need all of this. We only need like this part and this part. Okay, great. When a team starts building prototypes and testing those with customers, which of these things do you need? And so you end up like mapping the legal process against the innovation process. And like that, you start to build buy-in from your enablers. At Pearson, one of the conversations we had to have was with finance. How much money would you be willing to part with without making people write a business plan? And you go back and forth until they went, we'll only give you £300,000 without a business plan. Beyond that, you'll have to write a business plan. Then you go, okay, that's fantastic. So now we can map out a process where we give teams $50,000 for the first stage of innovation and then $250,000. And then after that, they have to create the business plan. Right? But you cannot do that without having conversations with enablers. Right? It's really, really important. And then finally, of course, you might need to build a network of coaches to support teams as they're working. So effectively, what you're doing is you're building an innovation community. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? We're doing this because we want to make innovation a legitimate part of how our company does business. Right? That's why we're doing this. And then after that, you're now ready to actually start scaling the movement. Now you're actually ready to sort of scale the movement. You can now go into the late majority. And these people, right, you're not actually going to them. Like, they're being drawn to you by the work that you're doing, right? And then you can maybe start building like a roadmap. Now the roadmap makes sense because people will listen to you because you're actually somebody important enough to listen to, right? The biggest problem or the biggest attitude problem you can have as an innovator is to think that you should be listened to right now because companies are being disrupted. You think that gives you enough legitimacy. It doesn't. And it shouldn't. Right? And so this is the time now to start building your roadmap, maybe creating a really great innovation playbook. Like, I like the kickbook that Swisscom was showing earlier. It's really beautifully done. Also, start aligning with strategy, talking to HR, aligning with incentives. All of these things are things that you can do later on, right, as you're sort of moving down this sort of transformation journey. And so, I'm going to close my talk, because it's also after lunch. I can see people like falling asleep. And then we'll jump into conversations with loads of time. You can ask questions. We can do battle and all of that stuff. But what I want to just tell you is that, like, when people talk about pirates, not all pirates are the same. And I had to do a bit of research to figure this one out, to figure this metaphor out. So just hang with me for a minute. So in the world, when people say pirates and buccaneers and privateers, they think that all those things are the same thing. So we use pirate, buccaneer, privateer as interchangeable sort of terms. But actually, there's a really big difference between a pirate, a buccaneer, and a privateer. And you can see that my privateer is wearing a tie. Right? A pirate is actually somebody who's illegal, like they're unattached to anything. They're roaming the seas. They're basically a criminal. And if any country catches them, they're dead. Right? Which is the same thing with your ideas. Like, if anybody finds out what you're working on, they're going to kill it. Right? If you're a pirate. A privateer, on this other extreme, on the other end, is actually, it's a pirate that's been commissioned by a specific country to go and raid the ships of an enemy country. And when they come back with the loot that they have collected from raiding all these ships, they are actually accepted back into their country and celebrated. Right? Loads of Sir Francis Drake is a famous pirate who was a privateer for Queen Elizabeth. Right? Now, the best thing to do is actually go beyond being a privateer and become an explorer. Because when you come back from your explorations, there are people who care about what you were exploring. Because you have a commission, you have a charter from your country to go do something and then bring it back. If you don't have that, you're just a pirate. And believe you me, I have done this work for a long time, since I had 3 followers up to now. And all the innovators who operate like pirates have a really high mortality rate. They burn out because of politics, they burn out because their ideas won't be accepted, they get fired straight up. The CEO changes, and then the new CEO starts asking questions. We've been spending $3 million a year on that lab. How much new revenue has that lab created? Yeah, no, they're the cool guys, they're learning. Okay, scrap, away from the budget, right? This is happening all the time. Okay, so you really want to think about what type of pirate you are. Are you just a straight-up pirate? If you want to do that, just go do a startup. You can't survive doing that inside a large company. But being a privateer is a completely different thing. It's harder work, but I think that it's work that we can do if we want to be successful at the stuff that we're doing. So everything I just showed you as I was flipping through it, those are all chapters in my new book, Pirates in the Navy. You can pre-order it at Unbound. I'm publishing it with Thinkers 50, and I look forward to hearing your questions. Thank you.